Darren Zayne had planned on disappearing just for a week. No press, no board meetings, no fake smiles over cocktails at charity galas. Just pine trees, silence, and a cabin he'd found online under the name Whisper Ridge. He didn't expect the woman handing over the keys to look like trouble wrapped in a flannel shirt and jeans. "You're early," she said, stepping onto the porch as he got out of his black Escalade. Her voice was crisp, no nonsense, but there was something in her eyes, an edge of curiosity maybe. "I was about to go check the water heater. I like early," Darren replied, adjusting his sunglasses, "and cold showers aren't my thing." She gave a short laugh and held out her hand. "Brielle Carrington, I own the place." Darren took her hand, noting the firm grip. Darren. He never added his last name in places like this. It was a habit. The name Zayne opened doors and started rumors. Rural Colorado didn't need to know who he was, not yet. Brielle gestured toward the cabin. "It's all yours. Fireplace works, kitchen's stocked, and cell service is terrible just like you asked." "Perfect." She lingered for a second, eyeing him. "You don't look like the type who books cabins solo. And you don't look like the type who rents them out." That earned him a raised brow. "What type do I look like?" He smiled. "The type who owns the whole mountain." She didn't smile back. "I just own this part." Brielle turned and walked down the steps, heading toward a dusty blue pickup. He watched her go, long brown braids swinging between her shoulder blades, boots crunching the gravel. She paused at the door. "There's a storm coming tomorrow," she called. "You might be stuck here for a bit. I've been stuck in worse places." She didn't answer, just climbed into her truck and drove away. The next morning, the storm hit like a freight train. Snow slammed into the cabin, thick and fast. By noon, the road was gone 2 feet under powder. Darren stood at the window holding a mug of coffee, staring out at the white mess. He'd gotten what he wanted: silence, no calls, no emails. No one asking him to fix things with a wire transfer, but he couldn't stop thinking about Brielle. She was unlike any woman he knew. She hadn't recognized him, hadn't asked about his car or his watch or why a man in a $1,000 coat was renting her cabin. She didn't care. That night, the power cut out. Darren lit the fireplace and opened a bottle of wine he'd found in the cabinet. He was halfway through a glass when headlights cut across the snow. He opened the door to see Brielle climbing out of her truck, bundled in a thick coat. "You came back. You're a city guy," she said, hauling a toolbox from the back. "I figured you wouldn't know how to fix a fuse box if it punched you in the face." "Fair." She stepped in, shaking snow from her coat. Her cheeks were flushed from the cold. Darren stepped aside, letting her pass. "I can't offer much except wine and bad company." "I'll take the wine," she said, crouching beside the fuse box near the kitchen. He leaned against the counter, watching her work by flashlight. "You always make house calls in a blizzard." "Only when I think someone might burn my cabin down trying to microwave popcorn," he laughed. "I haven't touched the microwave. Yet." A few minutes later, the lights blinked on. She stood and dusted her hands. "Impressive. I grew up here." "You learn how to fix things when the nearest handyman is 30 miles away." He poured her a glass of wine and handed it to her. "To fuses and flannel." She clinked her glass against his. "Cheers." They sat near the fire, the crackle filling the silence. "So what do you do back in the city?" she asked. Darren hesitated. "Investments, hedge fund, something like that." She looked at him over her glass. "You don't talk much about yourself." "Neither do you," she shrugged. "Nothing to say. I run cabins, I fix roofs. And I try not to get swallowed by the forest." "That sounds peaceful." "It's lonely sometimes," she admitted. "But it's mine. I built this business after my dad passed. He left me the land and I turned it into something. Keeps me busy." He respected that more than she knew. They talked until the fire burned low. About her dad, her stubborn dog that had passed last year, about the time she'd nearly set a cabin on fire trying to kill a hornet's nest. He hadn't laughed that hard in months. When she stood to leave, he caught her wrist. "Stay." Brielle stared at him. "Why?" "It's late. The roads are worse now, and I don't want to be alone tonight." She hesitated, then nodded. They didn't kiss. They didn't touch. But she curled up on the opposite end of the couch, and he watched her fall asleep with the firelight dancing across her face. And for the first time in a long, long time, Darren Zayne wasn't thinking about the stock market or his lawyer or the board. He was thinking about a woman in flannel who owned a mountain and somehow already held a part of him he hadn't planned on giving away. By the time the sun rose behind the thick curtain of snow-covered pines, Brielle was already gone. Darren found a folded note on the kitchen counter, written in sharp, slanted handwriting, had to check on the cabin in the east clearing. Take the truck if you need it, keys are by the door. He stood there for a moment, staring at the note, surprised by the small gesture. She'd trusted him with her truck. He hadn't earned that, not yet. He spent the morning pacing. The cabin, comfortable as it was, suddenly felt confining. He tried reading a paperback he'd pulled from the shelf, some old mystery, but the words blurred. His thoughts kept circling back to her. Around noon, he gave in and drove. The snow had slowed, but the road to the east clearing was an unplowed mess. He took it slow, tires crunching through the drifts, until he spotted her truck already parked beside a smaller cabin nestled deep in the trees. She was on the roof. He stepped out and called up, "You always do roof repairs in a snowstorm." She glanced down, strands of hair plastered to her forehead beneath a wool beanie. "Only when the chimney cap decides to fall off mid-blizzard. You here to supervise?" "I was going to offer help." She raised an eyebrow. "You know how to hold a ladder." "I can manage that." Once he'd propped the ladder securely, he climbed up beside her. She handed him a wrench without a word. They worked in sync, him holding the metal piece in place, her securing it with practiced turns. "You're surprisingly handy," she admitted, tightening the last bolt. "I went to boarding school. You learn to build things when you're grounded from electronics." She gave a short laugh, then stood with a sigh. "That should hold." They climbed down, boots sliding slightly on the icy rungs. Inside the smaller cabin, she lit a fire while he shook snow from his coat. "Why'd you come?" she asked, not looking at him. "I didn't want to sit around waiting for another note." Brielle crouched near the hearth, feeding the flames. "I didn't expect you to stay more than a night." "Most people don't. I'm not most people." She sat back on her heels, brushing ash from her hands. "That much is obvious." He watched her carefully. "What gave me away? You're too polished, too careful. You look at everything like you're assessing value, not just looking." He didn't deny it. "And you look at people like you're checking for exits." Brielle leaned against the wall. "I've had to." He didn't press. Whatever made her that way wasn't his business yet. They stayed in the small cabin most of the afternoon. The storm had done more damage than expected. A tree had collapsed part of the back fence and the water pipes had frozen. Brielle didn't complain once. She worked like a woman used to solving problems alone. By dusk, they were both covered in mud and snowmelt, hands raw from the cold. He offered to drive her home, and for once, she didn't argue. Back at the main cabin, she stole the first shower. When she returned, her damp hair braided and a faint line of exhaustion around her mouth, Darren had made tea. Not coffee. He remembered seeing her add honey to a mug the night before. She took the cup without a word and sat across from him, legs tucked beneath her. "I used to think success meant not needing anyone," he said, watching the steam rise from his own cup. "Now I think it just means no one knows when you're falling apart." Brielle looked at him, eyes unreadable. "Are you falling apart, Darren?" He didn't answer. She set her cup down. "You don't talk like someone running from a bad breakup. You talk like someone who's tired of pretending everything's fine." He leaned back. "You always analyze your guests this much, only the ones who show up with no last name and too many silences." He looked at her for a long moment. "I run a company, a big one. My name's Darren Zayne." She blinked once. "As in Zayne Enterprises?" "The same." Brielle stood slowly, crossed to the window. "You own half the skyline in Manhattan." He didn't say anything. She turned to him. "So why are you here, Darren Zayne?" He didn't flinch. "Because I forgot what it feels like to not be watched, judged. Expected to fix everything. I needed a place where no one knew who I was, and then you walked out of that cabin like a damn avalanche." Her jaw tightened slightly. "I don't need fixing. I never said you did." They stood in silence, the fire crackling low behind them. "I'm not afraid of who you are," she said finally, "but I'm not interested in being a pit stop while you figure out whether you miss your empire." He crossed the room, stopping just short of touching her. "I don't miss it. Not the way I thought I would." Her expression didn't soften, but she didn't step back either. "Don't think I'm impressed by private jets or penthouses," she said. "I don't want you to be." "Then what do you want?" He reached up, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. She didn't pull away. "I want to see what happens if I stay." She held his gaze for a long time. "Then stay, but don't expect me to fall for a man who only knows how to disappear." "I'm not disappearing this time." She nodded once, then turned and climbed the stairs without another word. But she didn't close her bedroom door. The wind had calmed by morning, leaving behind a crystalline stillness that blanketed the mountains in silence. Darren stood shirtless at the kitchen sink, rinsing a pan from the breakfast he'd made: eggs, toast, and a fresh pot of strong coffee. Brielle had taken her plate to the porch without a word, needing space, maybe, or simply more time to process what he'd revealed the night before. He didn't follow her. Instead, he let the sound of birdsong and the occasional creak of settling snow fill the space between them. When she came back inside, her braid was loosely tied and her boots tracked in a light trail of snow across the floor. She glanced at the stove, the empty pan in the sink, and the folded dish towel on the counter. "You cook?" she asked, her tone unreadable as she leaned against the doorway. "I do when I'm trying not to think," he said, not looking up from drying the last mug. "It turns out anxiety tastes better with eggs." She moved closer, folding her arms. "I thought billionaires had private chefs." "I do." "He's probably wondering if I've been kidnapped." She tilted her head slightly. "You didn't answer your phone once since you got here." "I left it in the glove compartment. I didn't want to hear from anyone." "Did you come here to hide?" "No." He turned to face her. "I came here to stop pretending I wanted the life I built." She studied him carefully. "You're not the same man who showed up in that black SUV." "No," he said. "I think he got snowed in somewhere." Brielle didn't smile, but her shoulders eased. She stepped into the room and picked up the mug he'd just dried, holding it between both hands. "I got a call on the landline this morning," she said. "Someone named Caroline said she was your executive assistant. She tracked you down through the property records." He didn't react, but something tightened behind his eyes. "She said the media's looking for you. Something about a shareholder meeting you skipped without warning. People are panicking." "I expected that," he said quietly. She sounded worried. She should be. Brielle set the mug down carefully. "Why aren't you going back?" He leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "Because I'm not ready to keep lying to everyone. I built that company to prove something to my father, to the board, to the ghosts of every person who ever said I couldn't, and I won. But somewhere along the way, I lost track of what I wanted. And now I want something real." She looked down at her hands. "You don't know me. I know you don't ask for help even when you need it. I know you check every window twice before leaving a cabin. I know your hands are always warm, even when it's freezing. And I know I think about you more than I think about anything else." Brielle exhaled slowly. "That's not the same as knowing someone." "No," he said, "but it's a damn good start." For a long moment, the only sound was the ticking of the old clock above the door. Then she stepped back, reaching for her coat. "I need to check the generator near the ridge. Power's been cutting out again." "I'll come." She hesitated, then tossed him a pair of gloves. "Try to keep up." The trail was narrow and winding, the snow packed hard beneath their boots. Darren followed her carefully, noting the way she navigated without hesitation, pausing only once to check a broken fence post they passed. They didn't talk much. The silence between them felt different now, less like avoidance, more like understanding. At the ridge, the generator was half buried under snow. Brielle knelt beside it, brushing off the panel and checking the fuel gauge. "Someone's been siphoning from it," she muttered. "That's the third time this month." "Someone local, probably the same guy who used to sneak into the east cabins and steal propane tanks," she said. "I caught him once, said he needed heat for his kid. I didn't turn him in." Darren crouched beside her. "You let him keep doing it." "I started leaving full tanks by the trail instead," she said. "Figured if he was desperate enough to steal, he didn't need the guilt too." He looked at her, surprised. "You're not what I expected. Neither are you." They got the generator running again, the low hum breaking the stillness of the trees. As they stood, Darren caught her wrist before she could walk away. I don't want to leave this place, he said. Not just the cabin. She pulled her hand back gently. You're not meant to live in the woods, Darren. I'm not meant to live half alive in a glass tower either. She met his eyes. What are you saying? I'm saying I'm tired of building empires I don't want just so I can be alone in bigger rooms. I want something that doesn't vanish the second the market dips. You think I'm that. I think you're the only thing that's felt real in years. Brielle looked away, jaw clenched. You're not supposed to say things like that after 3 days. I'm not supposed to disappear into the mountains and find someone who makes me want to change my entire life either. But here we are. She didn't answer. Instead, she started walking back down the trail, her steps quicker than before. He didn't follow, not then. But when he returned to the main cabin later that evening, chilled and restless, he found her sitting at the table with a worn folder and a stack of maps. What's all this? He asked, hanging his coat by the fire. I've been thinking, she said, not looking up. There's land east of here I've been trying to buy for years. It borders my property and has a few cabins I could restore. And I can't afford it. Not unless I take out a loan I'll be paying off until I'm 60. He crossed the room slowly. Why are you telling me this? Because if you're serious about wanting something real, then help me build it. She looked up, her eyes steady. I don't need a savior, Darren. But I could use a partner. He stepped closer. Not just business, no, she said. Not just business. He reached down and touched her hand, his voice low. Then let's start something that doesn't break when the world does, and for the first time she didn't pull away. Brielle stood at the edge of the property line, one boot pressed into the frost-hardened earth, a rolled survey map clutched in her hand. The wind tugged at the collar of her jacket, but she didn't flinch. Darren was a few steps behind her, silent, watching the way she surveyed the land like she was already building something out of it in her mind. You ever seen the east slope in the spring? She asked without turning. It turns gold, not yellow, not green gold. Like the trees are trying to outshine the sun. He stepped beside her. Then we'll be here when it happens, she glanced at him. Darren nodded. I spoke to my lawyer last night. The land's tied up in probate, but it's negotiable. The price is steep, but it's not about the money. I'm not looking for a handout. I'm offering a stake, he said. 50-50. You run the expansion however you want. I'll back it, but I don't want a title. No paperwork with my name stamped at the top. I just want to see what you're building take shape. You'd walk away from your company for this. I'm not walking away, he said. I'm restructuring from the ground up. I've already released the interim CEO. I'll be on the board, but remotely. I'll fly back when I'm needed, but the day-to-day is done. I built it to run without me. It's time I lived like that's true. She absorbed that, her thumb brushing the edge of the map. You've made a decision. I've made the only one that ever felt like mine. Brielle folded the map and tucked it under her arm. Then I guess we've got a ridge to clear and a driveway to carve out. He smiled at that. And cabins to restore. You better be ready to lift drywall. I'll lift whatever you give me. Her eyes flicked to his, sharp but softened. I meant what I said. I don't want a savior. You're not getting one, he said. You're getting a partner who happens to own a fleet of helicopters and has a habit of overcommitting emotionally. I don't need the helicopter, she said, but I might need the overcommitting. Back at the cabin, the air had shifted. It wasn't just about adjusting anymore, it was about planning. They spent the next 2 days mapping the new cabins and sketching out ideas. Darren suggested building a greenhouse on the south side of the property. Brielle countered with a lodge that could host retreats and winter workshops. They argued about whether the main road should be gravel or paved, until Darren offered to fund a hidden underground cable line to preserve the look of the land. By the third night, she opened a bottle of cider she'd saved since last fall. They sat by the fire, her feet tucked under her, a notebook of hand-drawn plans between them. I used to think I'd be alone forever, but I was okay with it, she said, watching the flames. I thought needing someone meant giving up part of myself. It doesn't, Darren said. You just end up more of who you already were, if it's right. She looked at him. This is right. He took her hand, his voice low. I want to do this with you, not just the land, the life. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she rose and walked to the drawer near the kitchen, pulling out a thin wooden box. She opened it and took out a key, old brass, slightly tarnished. "My father gave this to me when I turned 18, she said. "It unlocks the first cabin we ever built together." "I've never given it to anyone." She pressed it into his hand. "Now you have a key to something that matters." He stood slowly, stepping close. "I want to earn that. You already did." The next day, the snow began to melt under the first breath of spring. Ice dripped from the eaves as Darren walked out with Brielle, their boots sinking slightly into the softening earth. She pointed to a grove of trees that hadn't been cleared yet. "That's where the lodge will go. I'll call the architect," he said. "But only if you approve the sketches. Only if you stop trying to put a wine cellar in every blueprint. No promises." Later that week, he took her to Denver, not in the Escalade, but in a sleek black helicopter. She'd protested, but when they landed on the rooftop of a boutique hotel with a rooftop garden and panoramic mountain views, she'd stopped arguing. The penthouse was already reserved. He led her through the double doors and into a space filled with soft candlelight and fresh pine branches laced along the windowsills. A string quartet played low in the background, and the snow-capped peaks glowed orange in the dusk. She turned to him, eyebrows lifted. "This is a lot." "It's just enough," he said, pulling a small velvet box from his coat pocket. Her breath caught. "I used to think love was a liability," he said, "something that distracted you, but you're the only thing that's made me focus. You're the only thing I've ever wanted without negotiating with myself first." He opened the box. Inside was a ring with a simple, elegant band and a single mountain-cut diamond. "I want to build everything with you. Tell me I'm not too late." Brielle looked at him for a long, silent moment, her eyes unreadable. Then she reached out and closed his fingers over the box. "You're not too late," she said, "but you don't have to ask. I've already chosen you." She didn't wait for him to kneel. She simply stepped closer, pulled him into her arms, and kissed him like the storm had never ended. Weeks later, the first logs arrived for the new build. A team of restoration experts, personally flown in by Darren, began work on the east slope. The plan was underway. The land was theirs. And the life they were creating didn't look like a fairy tale. It looked like roots, like something planted deep enough to stay. That spring, the trees turned gold early. And this time, Darren saw them from the porch, arms wrapped around the woman who had changed everything. Not because she saved him, but because she reminded him what it meant to be found. Brielle adjusted the collar of her navy wool coat as she stepped onto the gravel driveway, blinking against the early morning light. The air had shifted since winter, softer now, tinged with the scent of thawed pine and damp earth. A few yards ahead, Darren stood with a clipboard in one hand and a steaming mug in the other, speaking with the construction foreman near a stack of reclaimed timber. The lodge was already taking shape behind them, the beams rising with a quiet kind of promise. "You're up early," she called out, her boots crunching as she approached. Darren glanced over his shoulder. "Someone has to make sure your dream doesn't get built crooked." She stopped beside him, eyeing the blueprint tucked under his arm. "I thought we agreed I'd handle the layout." "You did. I'm just making sure no one swaps the orientation on the solarium." "You wanted morning light, remember?" "I remember. You also said you weren't going to micromanage." "I lied, but only when it comes to your happiness." She rolled her eyes, but her smile gave her away. "You're lucky I like you. I'm counting on it." Darren handed her the mug. "You missed breakfast." "I was walking the West Trail. A couple of trees came down in the last storm. We'll need to clear them before the next group arrives." He reached for the radio clipped to his belt. "I'll have the crew take care of it." Brielle took a sip of the coffee. "No, I'll do it. I need time to think, alone." Darren studied her quietly. "What's on your mind?" She hesitated, then met his eyes. "My mother called." His expression didn't shift, but the air between them did. "What did she want?" She heard about the expansion. "One of the local papers ran a piece on the lodge plans. She's coming out next week." "Is that good news?" Brielle gave a small shrug. "We haven't spoken in almost 5 years, not since the funeral. She wanted me to sell the land, said it was a waste staying here. I think she expected me to crash and burn before 25. And now, Now she thinks I've succeeded because you're funding the expansion. Darren's brow furrowed. That's not fair. It's not untrue, she said, setting the mug down on a nearby crate. But what she doesn't understand is that I would have done it anyway. Slower, maybe, harder, definitely, but I wasn't waiting for someone to save me. I know that. Darren stepped closer. You didn't need me, Brielle, you chose me. That's the difference. She looked up at him, something easing in her expression. Will you be here when she comes, if you want me to be? I do. He nodded, brushing a piece of sawdust from the shoulder of her coat. Then I'll be right beside you. Every step. That night they ate dinner on the porch. Nothing fancy roasted vegetables from the greenhouse and grilled trout Darren had caught in the nearby stream. The stars were sharp and clear overhead, the kind of sky you only get miles from city lights. Brielle rested her head on his shoulder, her fingers laced through his. I never thought I'd have this, not just the land, this life. You built it, Darren said. I just showed up late and tried to catch up. I'm glad you did. He kissed the top of her head. So am I. The following week, Brielle's mother arrived in a hired car from Denver. She stepped out in a tailored coat and heels that sank into the gravel, her eyes scanning the property with an expression that rode the line between judgment and awe. Brielle met her halfway down the path. You made it. Her mother's gaze landed on the nearly completed lodge, the workers moving like quiet ghosts between scaffolding. You've changed things. I've built something, her mother pursed her lips, with his help. With my hands. His support just made it faster. Darren emerged from the cabin then, dressed in worn jeans and a flannel shirt that had become his unofficial uniform in the mountains. He offered a polite nod. Mrs. Carrington, her eyes flicked to him with recognition. Mr. Zayne. I see the rumors were true. I try to keep them interesting. Brielle's mother narrowed her eyes slightly. You're staying here? I am. Permanently, Darren's arm slipped around Brielle's waist. We're building a life here together. It wasn't a confrontation, it was a declaration. Her mother stared at them for a long moment, then adjusted her scarf. I suppose I should see the inside of this lodge then. Brielle led the way, and Darren followed with a quiet pride in his step. Later, after the visit ended and the car disappeared down the winding road, Brielle stood by the fire pit, lighting a bundle of dried sage. She didn't say much, Darren said, stepping beside her. She didn't need to, Brielle replied. She saw it, everything I've built. Everything we've built. And she didn't approve, but she respected it, she exhaled. That's enough. He wrapped his arms around her from behind. You're enough. Summer melted into autumn, and the lodge's opening weekend arrived with golden leaves and a waiting list full of writers, musicians, and couples seeking silence. Brielle stood on the front steps in a forest green dress, her hair swept up, watching as the first guests arrived. Darren stepped beside her in a dark suit, his tie forgotten on a nearby bench. You ready? I've never been more. That night, after the last toast was made and the last candle blown out, Darren took her hand and led her to the clearing by the ridge. A row of lanterns flickered in the trees, casting halos of light across the grass. A small table waited at the center, with a single envelope resting on it. She eyed him curiously. What is this? Open it. Inside was a land deed. The east slope, transferred solely to her name. This is yours, he said. No strings, no contracts, just a gift, because every person should own the foundation under their feet. She looked up, stunned. Why would you? Because I love you, and because I want to marry you here someday under these trees. Tears welled in her eyes. Someday, I was being polite, he said. I meant soon. She laughed through the tears and threw her arms around him. Then let's do it soon. They married 2 weeks later in the clearing, surrounded by golden leaves and the scent of pine, no tuxedos, no velvet aisle. Just close friends, scattered lanterns, and the soft swell of a cello echoing through the trees. Brielle wore a simple ivory dress with boots beneath the hem. Darren wore the same flannel shirt he'd worn the day he arrived, the sleeves rolled, the collar open, and a smile on his face that hadn't left since she said yes. When the officiant asked if he took her hand forever, Darren didn't hesitate. I already have. And when she said yes, her voice didn't tremble because she wasn't afraid of love anymore. She had built a life with her own hands, and somewhere in the middle of it, she'd found a man who didn't want to change her, only to stand beside her as she grew. That night they danced barefoot under the stars, their laughter echoing through the forest. And when the fire burned low and the last guests wandered off into their cabins, Darren pulled her close and whispered, "We did it." She kissed him gently. "No, we're only just beginning." And they were. Together, always.